He was crying inside the fire. It wasn't loud, not over the crackling plastic, the hiss of steam, the chaos of hoses and radios, but I heard it, a sharp, desperate yip, almost swallowed by the smoke curling out of the green metal dumpster behind the Shell station on Fair Oaks Avenue in Pasadena, California. I froze mid-step. Another cry higher this time, not human. Sharp, alive. I dropped the hose and ran. We'd just gotten the flames under control. The dumpster had been smoldering for 20 minutes. Bags of trash, cardboard, melted detergent bottles. The heat coming off it was still brutal. And yet, under that heat, beneath a half-buckled lid, I heard him, a German Shepherd puppy, just 5 months old, black and tan, sitting in the far corner of the metal bin, surrounded by singed trash bags and charred junk. His ears were flat, his ribs were showing, and his front paw was lifted off the metal like it burned to touch. I saw his eyes before anything else, locked on me, wide, pleading. He didn't bark. He didn't flinch. He just stared. And under his paw, like it was something sacred, lay a scrap of cloth, pink, gray, sigh with the faintest word stitched on it. Lily. I didn't hesitate. I threw open the lid and climbed halfway in, one foot hooked on the side, the other balancing on a slick bar of melted plastic. Heat slapped me in the face, but I didn't care. I reached toward him slow, murmuring, "It's okay, buddy. I've got you." He didn't move. Only when my hands brushed his chest did I feel the trembling. His whole body was shivering, like he was caught between bolting and breaking. But he didn't run. He let me lift him gently out of the scorched metal. He was so light. I held him against my jacket, cradling that burned paw in my glove. His fur was soaked in smoke. His eyes didn't blink, but he pressed his nose into my chest slowly, like it was the first safe thing he'd known. "My name's Jason. I've been a firefighter in the city for 11 years. I've pulled people from buildings, animals from crawl spaces, but never, not once, have I looked into the eyes of something so small and known instantly." He didn't survive by accident. We rushed him to the mobile vet who works with local shelters. I didn't leave his side, not for a second. The assistant tried to take him from my arms, but he whimpered so hard I held him through the entire drive. His paw was burned, his whiskers were singed, but his vitals were strong, stronger than they should have been. "He must have been under something," the vet said, protected from the flames, maybe hidden under a bag. But who puts a German Shepherd puppy in a dumpster full of trash? That night, as he lay wrapped in gauze on the vet's table, I looked at him, really looked, and I knew what to call him. "Finch," I whispered, "you're small, but you made it through the fire." And whatever his story was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Finch didn't sleep. Not really. Even as the vet administered fluids and gently wrapped his paw, his eyes stayed open, watching, tracking, flinching with every movement around him. I sat beside the table, elbows on my knees, still in my turnout gear, smelling like smoke and rubber, wondering how a German Shepherd puppy had ended up in a dumpster fire, and why no one came looking for him. He didn't cry, didn't bark, just blinked slowly, as if his body was still catching up to the fact that he'd been saved. When I reached toward him with my bare hand, he stiffened. But I didn't stop. I let him sniff me, slow, careful. Then I gently scratched behind his ear, the one not singed at the tip. That's when it happened. He sighed a deep, shaky little breath and let his head drop against my palm. That sound broke me more than anything else. It reminded me of something I hadn't let myself feel in years, since the night our old shepherd, Max, died in a fire I couldn't get to in time. My son was 6. Max had been his shadow, and I hadn't let myself get close to another dog since. Not at the station, not at home. But Finch didn't care about my past. He was here now, and he needed someone. Dr. Myers, the vet, gave him a careful exam. "Burns are superficial. Paw pads will take some time. He's dehydrated and scared. But I think he's a fighter." I nodded, still watching him breathe. His fur was mottled with soot, but underneath he had that rich black and tan coat, classic for a German Shepherd puppy. His ears were mismatched, one standing tall, the other floppy. His whiskers looked like someone had singed them with a lighter. But his eyes were sharp, present, surviving. The tech brought in a heated blanket and a small bowl of water. I helped lower Finch into a crate lined with clean towels. He limped a little, then circled once before curling into a ball, still keeping one eye open. The piece of cloth, the one with the name Lily, I hadn't let go of it. It was barely bigger than a handkerchief, torn and filthy. But something about it felt important, like it mattered to him. When I held it near, he sniffed, then licked it once before resting his paw over it. "That his?" Dr. Myers asked. "I think so," I said. "He wouldn't let go of it in the bin." She nodded, then glanced at me. "What shelter should we call for intake?" The question hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Technically, I couldn't keep him. Not right away. But something in me rebelled at the idea of handing him off, of watching him get shuffled into a system alone again. "I'll take responsibility," I said finally, "at least until he's cleared." Dr. Myers gave a soft smile. "He's lucky." I looked back at Finch. The way he curled tighter around that burned scrap of cloth, the way his eyes never left mine. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm the lucky one." But I still couldn't shake one question. Who was Lily? And why did Finch hold on to that name like it was the only thing keeping him alive? The next morning, Finch was still curled up, his body half wrapped in the blanket I tucked around him. The scrap of cloth lay beneath his paw like it belonged there. His eyes opened when I walked into the room, but he didn't move, just lifted his head slightly, watching me with the same quiet intensity. He remembered. That look hit me harder than I expected. Most animals in shock detach, hide, or panic, but this German Shepherd puppy wasn't running from the world. He was clinging to it, clinging to me. I crouched beside the crate and spoke low. "Hey, Finch, you made it through the night?" He gave the faintest tail flick. His water bowl was half empty, a good sign, and he'd eaten a little of the soft kibble the tech had left, though he must have done it quietly when no one was watching. His paw was still red and swollen. The bandages held, but I could tell it throbbed. When I opened the crate door, he didn't flinch. He just watched as I gently reached in, scooped him up again, and cradled him like before. He pressed his nose to my shirt. I didn't say anything for a while, just stood there holding him in the golden light of morning, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath against my chest. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped, birds scattered, and life moved on. But here in this room, with this broken little life in my arms, everything felt still. Dr. Myers came in around 9 o'clock. She smiled when she saw him, then checked his vitals. "No fever. Paul looks a little better already. He's not out of the woods, but he's responding." She paused. "He's bonding with you, you know." I nodded. "It's strong, rare in trauma cases this soon." I knew what she was saying. Trauma dogs don't usually attach overnight, especially not German Shepherd puppies. Clever, stubborn, slow to trust when they've been hurt. But Finch had made a choice, and maybe so had I. "I'd like to take him home, at least during recovery," I said. Dr. Myers raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "No," I chuckled softly. "But I think he is." An hour later, with fresh meds, a soft carrier, and strict instructions, I loaded Finch into the passenger seat of my truck. He didn't like the motion at first. His paw trembled when I adjusted the strap. But once I set the carrier on my lap and cracked the window, he settled. Head out, sniffing the breeze, his one good ear perked slightly. He was seeing the world again. We pulled up to my place just after 11 o'clock. It's a small house off Maple Street. Nothing fancy, but it's quiet, safe, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was about to be alive again. I carried him inside, laid him gently on the dog bed I hadn't touched in years, Max's bed. The blanket still smelled faintly of cedar and ash. Finch sniffed it. Then slowly he curled into it like it belonged to him. I sat down next to him on the floor. He rested his head on my foot. "Welcome home," I whispered. And then I noticed something I'd missed before. The cloth scrap, the one with Lily on it. It wasn't just a name. It had tiny flowers printed faintly across the fabric. Kids' pajamas, a baby's blanket. My stomach turned because suddenly I realized maybe Finch hadn't been thrown away by accident. Maybe he was protecting something or someone. Finch didn't sleep like other puppies. He'd doze for 20 minutes, then startle awake, ears twitching, eyes wide, breath shallow. Sometimes he'd whimper softly like he was back inside that dumpster, back in the heat, waiting for someone who never came. The first time I tried to leave the room, just to grab coffee, he panicked. Not loudly, no barking or crying, just a sudden, desperate scramble to stand, to follow, dragging that bandaged paw across the floor, eyes locked on mine like I was abandoning him. I didn't leave. I sat back down, and he collapsed into my side like gravity had pulled him there. This German Shepherd puppy wasn't just hurt. He was haunted, but he was trying. Every hour, every breath, he pushed back against the fear that clung to him like soot. He sniffed around the room with cautious curiosity. He nudged his food bowl twice before taking a bite. And when I rolled a soft toy toward him, a little stuffed fox I hadn't touched since Max, he touched it once with his nose, then backed away like it might hurt him. He didn't want toys. He wanted presence. He wanted to be near someone who wouldn't leave. By day 3, the trembling had lessened. He started to rest longer, eyes closed, paws twitching softly in sleep. When I stepped outside to get the mail and came back 2 minutes later, he didn't panic. Just lifted his head, made sure I was real, and laid it back down. But that cloth lily, he still kept it under his paw. Always. Sometimes he'd lick it gently, like it was alive. Other times he'd nudge it closer before falling asleep. It wasn't random. It was ritual. That scrap was his anchor in a world that had turned to fire. I started asking around, called the station, checked with the local shelter, asked the precinct if there had been any reports. Missing pets, abandoned animals, anything. Nothing. No LEIY, no missing child. No one looking for a black and tan German Shepherd puppy pulled from a burned dumpster behind a gas station. But someone had put him there, and Finch hadn't been trying to escape. He'd been waiting. Every time I looked at him, I saw it. Not just pain, not just trauma, purpose. He'd survived because he had something left to do. That night I watched him as he slept, his paw over that scrap of fabric like it was a promise. And a thought hit me so hard it made my chest tighten. What if he hadn't been thrown away? What if he stayed to protect something? To protect someone? And if that was true, then maybe this wasn't just a rescue. Maybe it was a beginning. By the 5th day, Finch started following me, not with panic, but with purpose. He didn't limp as much. His paw still bore the red swell of burns, wrapped neatly with gauze. But he moved with determination, one careful step after another, like he decided pain wasn't reason enough to stop. He shadowed me through the house, to the kitchen, to the porch, even to the bathroom where he'd sit just outside the door, waiting, quiet, watchful. This wasn't fear anymore. It was loyalty. German Shepherd puppies are known for that fierce, unwavering loyalty once they choose someone. But with Finch, it was deeper. Every time I moved, he made sure I was still breathing. Every time I sat down, he exhaled like he could finally rest. He wasn't clinging to me. He was protecting me. That morning, I sat with him on the back steps as the California sun crept over the fence. He leaned his head against my thigh, and I looked down at him, at his soot-streaked fur, his slowly healing paw, and those eyes that never stopped asking silent questions. "You're not just a puppy," I said softly. "You're on a mission, aren't you?" He blinked, then glanced at the yard. And for the first time since I'd brought him home, his tail gave a full, slow wag. It felt like a yes. Later that afternoon, I took him for his first short walk, just a block around the neighborhood with the vet's blessing. I carried him most of the way, but when we passed the playground near Madison Elementary, something shifted. Finch tensed in my arms, his ears perked, and he stared at a little girl on the swings. She was maybe 5, light brown hair, pink shirt, her laugh carried across the grass. Finch made a soft sound, not a bark, not a growl, a whine, low, curious, familiar. I set him down gently. He limped toward the fence just a few feet and sat down, tail swishing slowly, eyes locked on her. She didn't notice him at first. Then she did. She hopped off the swing, ran to the fence and crouched low. "Hi, puppy," she beamed. Finch didn't move, but his ears stood tall. And then something incredible happened. He dropped to his belly and crawled forward just a few inches, then stopped. It was a gesture I recognized immediately. Submission, respect, recognition. The girl reached her fingers through the fence. "You're so pretty," she whispered. "Do you have a name?" Finch licked her fingers once, then turned his head and looked at me. I stood frozen, because on the girl's backpack, hanging just beside her like an afterthought, was a fabric patch. Dirty pink, gray trim, flowers and stitched in one corner. Lily, my mouth went dry. Was it a coincidence? Or had Finch found the one person he was waiting for? The one he'd never stopped guarding? And if so, what was she doing on the other side of that fence? And why did this German Shepherd puppy, broken and burned, stare at her like he'd already chosen her before the fire ever began? I couldn't breathe. For a second, the world tilted. Sunlight too bright, her name too loud in my head. Finch stayed pressed to the grass, unmoving, eyes locked on her like nothing else existed. And maybe in that moment, nothing did. "Lily," I said out loud, barely a whisper. She looked up, her smile faltered just slightly. "That's my name," she said, brushing hair from her eyes. "How did you know?" Finch whimpered again, not in pain. It was soft, almost relieved. I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? That a half-burned German Shepherd puppy had been pulled from a dumpster with a fabric scrap that had her name on it, that he'd held onto it like it was the only piece of home left. "Does this puppy look familiar to you?" I asked carefully. She shook her head slowly. "No, but he feels nice." "Have you seen him before?" "No, but he looks like the dog in my dream." That stopped me cold. "What kind of dream?" She looked down at Finch, now inching closer, his belly still dragging in the grass. "I was in a fire," she said simply. "A scary one. It was all dark. But I wasn't scared because the dog stayed with me. He wouldn't let me go. He was warm." I stared at her. Lily couldn't have been more than 5. There was no way she'd been near the fire. There were no reports of a child in danger, no alerts, no missing persons. And yet Finch had stayed in that dumpster under burning trash and melting plastic. Not fighting to get out, but guarding that cloth, the cloth that had her name. I crouched beside him, put a hand gently on his back. "Hey, Finch," I whispered, "is she the one?" He didn't look at me. He looked at her and wagged his tail. Lily's mother called her from across the playground. She turned, waved, then looked back at me. "Can I see him again sometime?" I nodded. "I hope so." As she skipped off, Finch stood on trembling legs and watched her until she was gone. Back at the house, he collapsed on his bed, exhausted but peaceful. For the first time, he didn't flinch in his sleep. He didn't whimper or twitch. He just breathed. Slow, even. Safe. He'd done something today, something important, but I didn't understand what. That night, I held the cloth again. Lily stitched faintly into the edge. The letters faded and frayed. I stared at Finch, curled up at my feet. "What were you doing in that dumpster, buddy?" I asked. "What were you protecting?" And deep down, I already knew the answer. Finch wasn't just surviving. He was guarding something the world had almost forgotten. And somehow, he still believed it mattered. The next morning, something had changed. Finch greeted me with a quiet bark, the first real vocal sound he'd made since the fire. It wasn't loud or playful. It was soft, certain. A signal, like he decided, "I'm here now. I'm healing. And I have work to do." His paws still hurt, but he walked more on it now, limping, yes, but with purpose. He followed me room to room with a new kind of energy, not just watchful, engaged, alert. That German Shepherd puppy was waking up. I took him out to the yard again under the soft Pasadena sunlight. He sniffed at the breeze, tracked a bird overhead, then settled at my feet, eyes scanning the horizon like he was reading it. I sat beside him, coffee cooling in my hands, wondering what was happening inside that little mind. And then I saw it. He rose suddenly and limped to the fence, ears up, tail low, but moving. It was her, Lily. She was walking down the sidewalk, hand in hand with her mother, pink backpack bouncing at her side. When she saw us, she lit up and tugged her mom's arm. They crossed the street. Finch didn't bark, didn't move. He just sat tall and still, ears perked forward like he'd been waiting again. Lily approached the gate. "Hi, puppy," she said softly. Finch stepped forward slowly, deliberately. He pressed his nose through the slats and rested his head there. Her mother knelt down beside her. "Is this your dog now?" she asked, smiling. "I hope so," Lily said, looking at me. "Can I pet him?" I nodded. She reached through the gate with careful fingers and touched his cheek. He closed his eyes. That's when I told her mother the story. Not all of it, just the parts that mattered. How Finch had been found inside a dumpster. How he was clutching a scrap of fabric. How that scrap had one word stitched into it. Lily. I expected disbelief, maybe concern, but her mother went quiet, then pale. "We lost everything in a house here last year," she said softly. "In San Diego, I had to carry Lily out in my arms. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Her blanket got left behind." "What did it look like?" I asked, barely breathing. "Gray, pink edges, little flowers." I went inside, came back with the cloth. Lily saw it and gasped. "That's mine. That's my blanket." Her mother stared at Finch. But how? No one had an answer. Somehow this German Shepherd puppy, 5 months old, burned and broken, had ended up hours away inside a fire, holding on to the last piece of a child's comfort. Waiting, not by accident. He hadn't just survived. He had delivered something. Something that still smelled like safety, like home. And now he was delivering himself into the arms of the one he'd never stopped guarding, not even through the flames. Finch stood taller that day, not physically. His legs were still wobbly, his paw still wrapped. But his presence filled the yard like never before. The German Shepherd puppy, who once trembled in silence, was now a sentinel, watching over Lily with calm, unshakable focus. She visited again that afternoon, this time with a small, stuffed bear in her arms. "It's for him," she said, holding it up through the fence, "so he won't be scared when he sleeps." Finch took the bear gently from her hands, not with his teeth. He nosed it softly, then tucked it under his chin as he laid down beside the gate. I didn't say a word because it wasn't about me anymore. It never really was. This was Finch's story, and for the first time, I was just a witness. Over the next few days, everything shifted. He walked farther, ate more. Let me brush out the ash from his fur, but his eyes never drifted far from the gate. And whenever Lily's footsteps approached, he was already there waiting. Tail still, ears forward, gaze locked. Their bond wasn't playful, it wasn't loud. It was something quieter, deeper, like a memory they both shared, but couldn't explain. I watched him closely, noticed how his breathing calmed when she sat near, how his muscles relaxed when she talked to him through the fence, how he would gently place his paw burned but healing against the wood slats as if to say, "I'm here. I never left." Lily began to bring him things. A little sock, she said, smelled like her house. A crayon drawing of the two of them under a bright orange sun. A folded note with hearts and the words, "You're brave," written in shaky block letters. Finch kept them all. I made a small box beside his bed for his treasures. He'd nudge them in himself, arranging them with that same quiet reverence he once gave to the scrap of cloth. The cloth was still there, but he didn't cling to it anymore because now the girl it belonged to was alive, real, close, and somehow he knew. One evening just before sunset, Finch did something I hadn't seen yet. He barked, not out of fear, not because of a noise. He stood at the gate, looked straight at Lily as she waved goodbye and let out a short, sharp bark. One time she turned, smiled. "I'll be back tomorrow." "Okay." His tail wagged. It was the first real bark of his new life, and in that sound I heard something more than healing. I heard purpose returning, because this German Shepherd puppy wasn't just recovering. He was remembering who he was, a guardian, a messenger, a light that refused to go out in the darkest place imaginable. And now that he'd found her again, he wasn't going to let her out of his sight. Finch began walking without a limp that week. His burned paw still needed care, and the fur hadn't fully grown back, but you wouldn't have known it by the way he moved. Head high, ears forward, tail held low and steady, like a banner that said, "I'm not just surviving, I'm here for something bigger." The German Shepherd puppy that once couldn't lift his head now met each day like it was a mission, and it was every morning at 8:12 sharp. Lily's walk to school time. He waited at the gate. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply sat quiet and strong with a little stuffed bear beside him and the drawing of them taped to the inside of the fence, his shrine of belonging. She'd always stop, sometimes just a quick wave and high Finch before school. Other times she'd kneel down and tell him about her homework or what she had for breakfast. He never missed a word. He listened like it was all that mattered in the world. And in a way it was. I started taking him on longer walks now that his strength returned. He moved better in the cool mornings, especially when we walked by the schoolyard. He didn't pull, didn't bark at other dogs. He just watched. One morning we stood by the park fence while the children played. Finch stood motionless, watching Lily on the slide. That's when something happened. A loud crash, a scooter, a child's scream. Finch's ears shot up. A boy had taken a spill at the edge of the playground. Scraped knee, crying. Kids backed away. Finch moved before I could react. He pulled toward the fence, alert, tense, not aggressive, but ready, protective. He whined once, low and focused. The boy's mother rushed in seconds later, scooping him up. But Finch didn't take his eyes off the scene until the boy stopped crying. Then he sat again, quiet, not a sound. That night I watched him sleep deeper than ever before. Curled beside his toy, the cloth with Lily lay at the foot of his bed, untouched but no longer clutched. It was changing. He was changing. The trauma didn't own him anymore. The fear had loosened its grip. What remained was instinct, duty. I looked at him and realized something I hadn't let myself believe before. This German Shepherd puppy had stayed in that burning dumpster, not because he was abandoned, but because he refused to leave. Someone somewhere had mattered to him. Whether it was Lily, the memory of her, or someone else long gone, he had waited until help came. And now, having survived, he wasn't just recovering, he was becoming. Finch wasn't just a rescued puppy. He was a protector in search of his purpose. And he was almost ready to find it. It happened on a Thursday. I remember the sky was clear, the air still warm even for Pasadena, and Finch had been pacing all morning, restless, more alert than usual. He kept circling the house, pausing at the windows, staring out like something was coming. He hadn't acted like that since the fire. I tried to calm him, brushed his fur, sat beside him on the porch, but he wouldn't settle. His body was tense, his ears constantly scanning. Then at exactly 3:42 p.m., as school let out, the street filled with the usual rhythm. Kids laughing, car doors slamming, backpacks thumping against tiny backs, and then a scream not far, not playful, sharp, panicked. I was on my feet instantly, so was Finch. It came from the side alley behind the school where parents cut through for parking. I grabbed my keys, but Finch was already clawing at the door. I opened it. He bolted. His body moved like something ancient had awakened in him. Like all his pain, all his fear had been burned away, and what remained was pure instinct. I followed, sprinting after him, heart in my throat. By the time I reached the alley, Finch was already there, standing between a frozen girl and a barking pit bull, off-leash, its hackles raised, muscles tensed, too much adrenaline and not enough control. And the girl, Lily, frozen in place, backpack dropped, eyes wide with shock. The dog wasn't attacking yet, but it was close. Something had triggered it, maybe a slammed car door or a horn. Its owner was nowhere in sight. Finch stood between them, still as stone. Then he growled, low, focused, not frantic, controlled. The pit bull hesitated, one step forward. Finch didn't move back. Instead, he stepped forward. Just once, tail down, eyes locked, body stiff, a warning. You'll have to get through me. It worked. The other dog backed off just slightly. Enough time for a teacher from the yard to rush in and grab Lily. I arrived seconds later, out of breath, just in time to see Finch still holding the line, not budging an inch. Then a man ran up, leash in hand, apologizing profusely, grabbing the pit bull and pulling him away. But Finch didn't move. Not until Lily ran back and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his soot-touched fur. He melted. His body sagged against her like he'd been holding up the world and could finally let it go. She whispered, "I knew you'd come." And in that moment, I saw it all come together. The fire, the cloth, the waiting, the way he guarded her without ever having met her before. This wasn't coincidence. This was destiny. Finch had been protecting her before they ever touched. And now in a dusty alley behind a California school, he had fulfilled the promise he made in silence. He hadn't just saved her, he had found her again. That night, Finch didn't sleep in his bed. He curled up at the foot of mine, his head resting lightly on my boots, like a soldier off duty, but not off alert. His breathing was steady, calm, no tremors, no midnight whimpers, just peace. I watched him for a long time. The German Shepherd puppy I'd pulled from a smoking dumpster was no longer just surviving. He was whole. The next morning, I got a call from Lily's mom. She spoke slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to hope too soon. "She hasn't stopped talking about him," she said, "about how he saved her, about how he found her." I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. Finch picked her before I did, maybe before anyone did. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked if he could come live with us. My throat tightened. I looked down at him, sleeping now. The patch of raw skin on his paw finally healed, fur growing in clean and soft. He wasn't mine. Not really, he never had been. He had just stopped here to recover, to remember, to wait, and now he was ready. That afternoon, Lily came by with her mom. She knelt at the gate like she always did. But this time, when I opened it, she didn't wait. She stepped into the yard, arms out, and Finch rose to meet her. Not with a bark, not with a tail wag. He walked straight into her chest and leaned his full weight into her, eyes closed, nose pressed against her shoulder. He knew. We all did. I helped carry his things. The bear, the blanket, the cloth with Lily still faintly stitched into the corner, and the small box of treasures he'd guarded since the fire. Lily's mom promised updates, pictures, vet checkups, a backyard, and love. So much love. As they drove away, Finch turned once in the back seat and looked through the rear window. Just once, not to ask permission, but to say thank you. Thank you for the in-between, for the shelter, for being the place he needed to stop and remember who he was. He wasn't just a burned puppy pulled from fire. He was a guardian, and now he was home. Some rescues stay with you forever. Finch wasn't just a burned German Shepherd puppy found in a dumpster. He was something more. Proof that love remembers even through fire, that loyalty survives even when the world doesn't make sense, and that sometimes the ones we rescue are already on a mission to rescue us. I didn't save him. Not really. He chose to live. He chose to stay when everything told him to run. He held on to a thread, one burnt piece of cloth with a little girl's name on it, and carried it through the smoke until he found her again. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. If Finch's story made you feel something, if it reminded you what hope looks like when it crawls out of the ashes, join the Diddy Animals 2.0 YouTube family.